Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The latest out of the women's bantamweight division, WBA champion Nina Hughes says, there are three of us showing that we want to fight each other and go for undisputed. Ebony is the only missing puzzle piece, the one that is holding it all up.
Nina has become more and more vocal over time that she wants to share the ring with Ebony. She wants to unify.
I don't normally call people out as I can't be bothered with all of that, but in this situation, it's just frustration as I want the big fights. Shannon was a big fight, and that fell through, but I had my voluntary, and Ebony deserves hers. I always knew she wanted a voluntary first, but when we wanted the unification fight next, now we are getting told she wants two voluntaries, and I'm thinking, why do you need two? Since she won the IBF title, all she's been talking about is unifying and becoming undisputed, and that she's the queen of the division. I only started on social media after she did an interview and said it's an easy fight to make and that she would beat me. And I think if you were that confident in beating me, why would you not have your voluntary and then take the fight?
It's a legitimate question.
The fight between the two other champions at this weight, Dina Thorsland and Yuli Hangluna, has already been made. And I think the saving grace for Nina is that if she can't get Ebony in the ring in a timely fashion, perhaps she can get the winner of that fight in the ring.
Perhaps.
There are not many divisions where it's that easy to make an undisputed fight, but there are three of us showing that we want to fight each other and go for undisputed. Ebony is the only missing puzzle piece, the one that is holding it all up. The other two champions are fighting in September, and with me and Ebony in the same country, under the same promoter, if we meet them, it sets up a massive undisputed fight for next year. But I think she thinks she can just pick and choose who she fights, and that she has all the say in everything. I will probably get a mandatory next, and Ebony is close to being ordered as well, Serene Satine
Of Turkey.
The only thing that overrides that is a unification, so it's one of them. Would you rather fight a mandatory that no one is interested in, or unify?
It is true that Ebony wants two fights before unifying instead of just one. That is a valid question.
Obviously, the ideal route for both fighters is to go in an undisputed clash with two belts each. It makes it a fairer match in terms of belts and money as well. Depending on what Ebony ends up doing, though, we will target the other route if we have to. My manager, Lee Eaton, also represents Dina, so if she is victorious, that is potentially an easy fight to make.
Both Nina and Dina are managed by Lee Eaton of Let's Go Management, but only Nina has a major promoter behind her, Matchroom.
Hypothetically speaking, if a fight between Nina and Dina were made in the absence of Ebony, in all likelihood, it would be Matchroom that bankrolls the show, that promotes it.
Though for that scenario to come into fruition, Dina Thorsland must beat Mexico's own WBC champion, Yuli Hangluna. And that's a tall order. That's a tall ask. For me and my money, both Yuli Hangluna and Dina Thorsland are in fact the two best bantamweights in the division.
It's not a foregone conclusion that Dina wins. Nina continued, people are too scared of losing. I have never said I would beat everyone and be the best in the division, but I want the opportunity to try. I want the opportunity to fight for unification and hopefully win and then fight for undisputed. That has always been the goal, but until you try, you don't know. And win, lose, or draw, I don't think there would be any shame in that. If you lose, then at least you know you tried. You know you've fought the best out there.
My thoughts.
It's almost like Nina is implying that Ebony hasn't, that she hasn't shared the ring with some of the best fighters out there. Shannon Courtenay, Maria Cecilia Roman, more recently, Shannon O'Connell.
Ebony fought Shannon injured. She went into that fight with that injury. Most people don't know that.
And I feel like Ebony Bridges, for as long as people have become familiar with this fighter, has been subject to unfair and unbalanced criticism. And I feel like some of what Nina is saying, it is unfair.
Not just saying this because Ebony's a hot blonde with a great rack.
Because Ebony Bridges went into that Shannon O'Connell fight that a lot of people favored her to lose. She went into that fight with an injury and she came out on top. Afterwards, she had to get surgery on the hand, and that's why she hasn't fought yet.
Tack on that she's breaking in a new trainer. She's not with Mark Tibbs anymore.
She's with David Caldwell. It just sounds to me like Nina Hughes wants things to happen on her own schedule, on her own time, and Ebony Bridges isn't on Nina Hughes' time.
I don't blame Nina for wanting the unification match sooner than later. theater. As a boxing fan, I myself would like to see them unify before this year is up.
But the circumstances are what the circumstances are, and it's a bit unfair to rush Ebony Bridges, who's still coming off of that hand surgery, breaking in a new trainer.
We're gonna act like Ebony hasn't fought anybody? We're gonna act like Ebony hasn't earned her stripes?
Nina is a few years older than Ebony, and perhaps, at least in part, why she wants to hit the gas on the unification is because she ain't got as much time as Ebony.
That maybe she feels that Ebony is more beatable than the winner of Thorsland versus Luna.
Could be that. I mean, Dina Thorsland and Yuli Hangluna really are far more experienced than either Ebony or Nina. So it's slim pickings with the winner of that fight, whereas perhaps with Ebony, she likes her chances a little better.
Maybe.
Just think it's a little bit short-sighted, a little bit unfair to rush Ebony Bridges, of all people, who's fought some really solid fighters.
Already?
It's unfair to rush her when she's the one coming off an injury and surgery.
She's not doing anything that most other fighters wouldn't do in that exact same situation.
So, you know, Nina wants the fight sooner than later, but want doesn't always get.
Why are you mad?
Men's lightweight and super lightweight news, you might have heard that the WBC has approved for Devin Haney to challenge Regis Prograis at 140 pounds, and he's now been named a champion in recess at 135. That is bizarre, to say the least.
Because he's not actually in recess. He still is in competition, just at another weight.
WBC lightweight champion Devin Haney petitioned to fight WBC super lightweight champion Regis Prograis. The sanctioning body's board of governors noted in a ruling obtained by Boxing Scene, champion Haney wished to maintain as WBC world champion at lightweight until after his fight with Regis Prograis, at which point he would decide in what division he would like to remain.
If he wins, he's not boiling back down to 135.
If he wins, he's going to stay up there, though. If he loses, if he were to go in there with Regis and he gets knocked out, is it really prudent to return to lightweight? Is it really prudent to
keep putting his body through that?
Devin Haney's in his mid-20s. His body is still growing. He's filling out more and more every day. Making 135 is not going to get easier. It's only going to get harder. So why worry about what titles he has there when, by all rights, moving forward, he shouldn't keep making that weight anyway?
The WBC shouldn't let him.
The WBC's mandatory challenger at lightweight is Shakur Stevenson. The WBC Board of Governors voted in favor of granting champion Haney's petition to fight champion Prograis for the WBC Super Lightweight World Championship, placing champion Haney as a champion in recess in the lightweight division and ordering a bout between lightweight mandatory challenger Shakur Stevenson and the highest available contender in that division. The ruling is less than a month after Haney and Stevenson both contacted the WBC with their separate requests regarding its lightweight title.
I feel like this ruling alienates Shakur Stevenson, but not just Shakur.
It also alienates any and every contender at 135 they are collecting sanctioning fees from.
You're collecting sanctioning fees from all these guys at 135 who aspire to fight for a belt you are not making available to them.
Another chapter of the World Boxing Council allowing special privileges to their favorites, their preferred fighters, preferred champions. You got to think about it. The guys in those ranks that are paying those sanctioning fees, they're not paying them for no reason. They're paying them so that the WBC will move them up those ranks so that one day they get to fight for the title. What's it all for if you're giving this guy special privileges? I'm not against him fighting Regis Prograis. I like that fight.
I'm okay with it.
But you've already got a mandatory challenger in the queue, and that is Shakur Stevenson. Does it not alienate Shakur that he now has to wait until well after the outcome of Devin's next fight?
Which is all the way out there in October.
Think about it. If Devin Haney fights Regis Prograis in October, and he wins or he loses, it's not like he's going to jump back in the ring a week later to defend his title against Shakur. Shakur would then have to wait.
If Devin wins, he'll probably vacate the WBC lightweight title to keep the super lightweight title. That's if he wins. But if he loses...
How long would it take him to return to action? How much longer would the World Boxing Council allow him to maintain that champion in recess status? And how long would it take for Shakur to get his title shot?
How long?
After fighting champion Prograis, allowing champion Haney to choose between remaining at 135 or 140 on a timetable that the WBC would order. Noted the WBC ruling. If champion Haney decides to return to the lightweight division within that timetable, the WBC would order the fight between champion Haney and the then world champion on a 50-50 purse split.
He's not going to go for that.
The split that they were said to have offered Shakur Stevenson wasn't a 50-50 split. It was a 75-25 split, per reports.
You should just vacate the title now.
I don't like what this does to the division. It kind of holds it up where Devin isn't likely to return to that weight anyway. Why not just vacate the title now? Keep the ball rolling. Let Shakur and some other fighter fight for it. Shakur Stevenson, who became the mandatory challenger after a 6th-round knockout of unbeaten Shuichiro Yoshino on April 8th in his hometown of Newark, New Jersey. He previously held the WBO featherweight title
And the lineal WBC WBO Junior Lightweight Championship.
I really like the Devin Haney versus Regis Prograis fight. That's a great fight. It's a great sequence of fights for Devin Haney, from fighting for undisputed against George Kambosos to defending it against Vasyl Lomachenko. Dubious outcome, but it was still a great fight.
Robbery!
Going straight into the fire with one of the hardest punchers and the most experienced fighters, experienced champions at 140 pounds, Regis Prograis. It really is a great sequence of fights, but I don't like the chicanery, the manipulation of the rank standings. If Shakur is in the queue now,
You're leaving the division now. Just vacate the fucking title and move on.
somebody else fight for it. I mean, at minimum now, Shakur knows that he's not going to get the fight for the WBC title this year. At minimum,
Looks that way because Devin's fight with Regis is in the fall.
towards the end of this year, Shakur cannot aspire to get him in the ring.
Since the WBC's letting Devin hang on to his WBC title, he can't fight for that either.
Whole thing just seems unnecessary. Men's welterweight news on the heels of this past weekend's action. Two-time welterweight champion Shawn Porter advocates for rematch between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence. Porter believes Errol Spence could fare much better in a sequel.
Because it would be at a better weight for Errol, because it would be at 154 if Terence allows it.
Errol Spence holds a contractual rematch clause, which he said he plans to activate with Crawford in control of the weight. And here, Porter says, don't necessarily expect the second fight to go down quite like the first. He's going to go home, he's going to talk to his team. They're going to really analyze this and figure it out, Porter said of Spence. I'm an advocate for the rematch. I believe wholeheartedly in Errol Spence Jr. I said that from day one until the fight happened. This is a 50-50 fight. I said, look at me after the 3rd round. I may be able to tell you who's going to win this fight. The point of it all is Errol Spence's ability to make adjustments. He has the ability to come in stronger, especially at 154, and mentally, he's so strong that I think that this is just a wrinkle in his career, and I think he wants to fix that wrinkle.
That's the problem. Believing in Errol Spence Jr. and believing that this was a 50-50 fight. What did I tell you?
I told you, this is not a 50-50 fight, and Errol Spence Jr. doesn't actually do anything better in terms of nuts and bolts boxing. There's nothing he does better than Terence Crawford. His only hope is that because he's a little bigger and he's a little beefier, that maybe he can hope to overpower him, though I didn't think he would, and he didn't.
I'm an advocate for the rematch, Porter told TMZ Sports. I believe wholeheartedly in Errol Spence Jr.
Him and a lot of other people that don't want to accept this one-sided beating, this lopsided loss, that were in shock and awe after just one round. Terence Crawford figured out Errol Spence Jr. and started laying into him in the second.
It's not often after a one-sided fight like that you hear people advocating for a rematch.
Really isn't a need based on how the first fight played out. So why is it supposed to be different with Errol? Why are we supposed to believe he's some kind of fucking unicorn? Because it's going to be at 154 instead of 147?
Well, he does have a contractual right to a rematch.
But why are we supposed to believe that he'll do better? Because it's at 154, possibly at 154 instead of 147, because Shawn thinks that Errol will be stronger there? You do realize that also applies to Terence Crawford, that if Errol doesn't leave as much of himself in the gym, making 154 as he did at 147, that also applies to Terence. He'll be stronger at that weight too, sharper at that weight, and more durable. Whatever benefit there is,
It's a benefit that they both reap.
the fight won't go any differently at 154 than it just did at 147. And this fight, this beating, I should say, because Errol was hardly able to make it a fight, is on par with the beating that Jeff Lacey received at the hands of Joe Calzaghe, on par with the beating that Meldrick Taylor received
At the hands of Julio Cesar Chavez.
this vote of confidence they're giving Errol. You'd think he was something out of a comic book, but he's just a man.
After a sustained beating over 9 rounds with 3 knockdowns.
There's a lot of talk about Errol's weight. being weight drained. There's a lot of talk about potential neurological damage as a result of the car accident in 2019. There's a lot of speculation,
There is.
things that we don't know, but here's what we do.
What?
This past Saturday, this guy got the shit beat out of him.
Those kinds of sustained beatings have a lasting effect on a fighter. They take years off the fighter's careers. I've seen fighters receive beatings like that, and when they came back, they did not come back the same. I'm talking about Jeff Lacey. I'm talking about Meldrick Taylor.
I'm talking about Errol Spence Jr., whose body's already been through enough the last 4 years. There's reason to believe that he's not the same fighter that he was, though if you don't want to give in to speculation, and you don't have to,
No.
if nothing else,
Got the shit beat out of him on Saturday.
Sean Porter told you ahead of this fight that it was a 50-50 fight. I told you it wasn't. You haven't learned your lesson yet.
You want to see him take a shellacking one more time?
I believe a large part of the reason so many people want to give Errol this vote of confidence is because they bought into the hype. Now they are left in disbelief that someone they thought so much of so easily unraveled.
They've seen it before, they just haven't processed it. How Deontay Wilder unraveled in the second and third Tyson Fury fight.
Career-altering beatings. How Stephen Fulton just unraveled this past week at the hands of Naoya Inoue.
Bear in mind, they wanted me and you to believe that he knew he was just a manufactured hype job, even though his resume said otherwise.
They thought the same thing about Terrence Crawford, another manufactured fighter by way of Top Rank. It was Errol Spence Jr. himself that credited Crawford's success to little more than Top Rank's matchmaking. I think he was talking about himself, whether he was aware of it or not.
Errol's the product of favorable matchmaking, not Terrence.
What's the common denominator in all of those fights? What's the common denominator? That the PBC fighter didn't just lose. No, they didn't just lose. They get destroyed.
Humiliated.
Demoralized. I've got no rancor, no ill will towards Errol Spence Jr., but in that fight, well, it was hardly a fight because he couldn't make it one.
Why do you think this keeps happening to PBC fighters whenever they decide to play with the kids from another side of the street, from the other side of the fence? Why do you think it happens?
I'll tell you why it happens. Because a promotional outfit like, say, a Top Rank, they're in the business of grooming fighters and developing fighters, developing champions, real talent. That's what they're in the business of, whereas the PBC is more focused on grooming stars.
Brands.
Not so much fighters, but attractions.
So when they actually get an elite fighter in front of them, they're like a deer in the headlights. They don't just get beat, they get demoralized. And that's what's waiting for Errol Spence Jr. if he fights Terrence Crawford again.
It's not going to go any different.